Hi, and welcome to another short session with Interform. The aim is to inform, transform, and perform. Today, we'll be discussing mandatory audits versus voluntary audits in a way that many business owners probably haven't heard of, but are imperatives for all organizations. Firstly, we'll be looking at their definitions and their differences. Then, we'll have a look at the applications of these audits and their relevance to you. And lastly, we'll learn about the relevance of both these types of audits to business continuity. Very important. Let's dive right in. The first audit, which is the mandatory audit, is known as an assurance audit and consists predominantly of financial and ethical protocol. The stock exchange markets around the world have specific prerequisites for listed organizations to adopt, including audits that will provide the assurance and transparency for all relevant stakeholders to ensure equitable trade. These prerequisites have obviously been adopted and shaped by a number of failures and successes through the years. The second type of audit, being voluntary, are known as risk audits. Now, these audit protocols are determined by the disciplines that make up the risk profile of an organization, which could include health, safety, environmental, quality, and even financial management. The first difference noted is in the purpose. According to L.R. Dixie, auditing 1892, the object of an audit could be threefold. Number one, the detection of fraud. Number two, the detection of technical errors. Number three, the detection of errors of principle. This mostly refers to assurance audits, and it may sound pretty negative, but in context, you want assurance from accurate information on the financial viability and ethical trade of an organization, if you're a shareholder as well as a stakeholder of interest. It also tells us something about the differences in the role players and the reporting structures. In South Africa, the Companies Act, as with all stock exchange markets, requires independent internal and external auditors and an audit committee to be established to ensure quality and integrity. The ISO 19011-2018 version of Auditing Management System Standard defines auditing as systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. This means that if you want to benchmark your organization, you can verify its conformance to a specific protocol, irrespective of mandatory requirements. And this approach is usually used for the insurance of risk. You see, you can have both pre-loss and post-loss financing mechanisms. The one prevents loss from risk, and the other attempts to replace loss from risk, but both are insurance mechanisms. Most management systems require management representatives, executive committees, and competent auditors. So it could be said that mandatory audits versus voluntary audits equal assurance audits versus risk insurance audits. The final difference brings us to a very important question regarding how this is relevant to you, of course. If assurance auditors report to the shareholders on the performance of the company and the directors, but risk insurance auditors report to top management on the performance of the company, why are both equally necessary? There are two issues that we need to address to enable us to answer this question. And in some context, you can refer to it as strategic risk versus operational risk. Number one, after an abundance of case studies like Bhopal, Piper Alpha, BP, and etc., we know that the check risk performance of an organization has a direct and indirect effect on the financial and overall performance through corporate social responsibility, business continuity, and sustainability obligations. How confident are you that your auditing process evaluates the exact qualitative and quantitative measures necessary to provide you with the proportionate assurance? Number two, let's say you're not a listed company and the mandatory audit requirements do not apply to you. What are the drivers that determine your business strategy and the relevant performance indicators? For the listed companies, there are two sides of the same coin here. There are several drivers for the assessment of organizations against triple bottom line principles and corporate governance practices. Locally, the Socially Responsible Investment Index, launched by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in May 2004, and the celebrated King 4 report have made significant strides. Some globally recognized examples would be the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Global Reporting Initiative, and the Social Accountability SA 8000 standard. There is an alarming amount, however, of triple bottom line and corporate governance auditors that accept evidence of mere legal compliance on basic health and safety, especially in governmental and semi-governmental sectors. When corporate governance is essential to strive beyond minimum compliance. It tells you something about their budgeting and risk collaboration. On the flip side, even though most of these drivers are yet voluntary, most listed organizations indeed go beyond basic compliance to seek world's practices and have gained considerable market share. I just have one question though, while we're on this topic. There are mega trends and there are mega risks. Globalization and digitalization are examples of mega trends. But mega risks like climate change, information security, terrorism, and pandemics have always been known to man and organization. This isn't news. Corporate governance and triple bottom line principles are designed for resilience to mega risks, including worldwide pandemics and black swan events. It's a basic health issue. But how strong were the audit protocols? More on black swan events in another video. According to an independent online article in January 2020 on findings by Xero, a cloud accounting firm, 90% of formal businesses make up small to medium enterprises in South Africa and contribute around 34% to South Africa's gross domestic product. This was in January, before the lockdown. Let's not even go to employment rates. Now, we know that the Companies Act, South African Companies Act, requires every company to submit an accountability and transparency report, and only public or state-owned companies to appoint a registered auditor. But the majority of small to medium enterprises are exempted from these assurance audits. It is not a legal requirement to conduct quality management audits as well. Yet, most small to medium enterprises somehow have attained ISO 9001 quality standards or similar certification. But when it comes to legally required health and safety and environmental matters, basic legal compliance almost seems unaffordable. This means that we've created this free market pool of quality training without tangible financial or ethical assurance. Why is this a problem? Well, do you want to build your house on rock or do you want to build your house on clay? In these few months alone, how many businesses have been destroyed by mega risks like the global health issue and are now dependent on alternative sources of capital? Remember earlier, I mentioned that certain disciplines make up the risk profile of a company. For example, again, occupational health and safety, environmental, quality, security, financial, and etc. That means that if you truly understand the disciplines that translate your risk profile, then you can master the required risk insurance and therefore gain the business continuity assurance. Here's an example. Let's look at the hierarchy of standards, consisting of 4 tiers. Firstly, legal standards, enterprise and corporate standards number 2, then national and international standards number 3, and world's best practices number 4. Most organizations can place their quality and financial standards at the 3rd tier, being internationally recognized. However, when you look at the rest of the disciplines like health and safety, it can barely be implemented at the legal standard. This tells you something about the budget, the drivers, the strategy, and ultimately the resilience or viability of the business. You can try to implement any kind of business continuity standard, but if these disciplines do not line up to the same level, almost like the triple bottom line principle, then the house will always remain divided, irrespective of the business strategy. So it's more than clear that the capitalist approach doesn't work. It doesn't promise business continuity, and it hijacks social responsibility and inevitably corrupts sustainability. Personally, I believe it's the relentlessness of the industrial and technological revolutions that creates a certain blindness to risk perception, but susceptibility to capitalist indoctrination. More on that in another video. To conclude, I think it is important to understand that even though assurance audits or corporate governance are not compulsory to certain market sectors, it doesn't mean that their foundational principles do not apply. And it's important to learn, it's vital to learn from these obligations to make informed decisions when it comes to business strategy. Thus, voluntary audits are equally important, if not even more important than mandatory audits. Thank you for watching, and please share this video if you think it can mean something to somebody that you know or to an organization that you know, so that together we can shape a sustainable future. I'll see you on the click side.